Well, there is no man better to go through the first weekend of the A-Leagues than Tin Nguyen. Tin, it's been a huge, huge weekend. It's been a huge couple of weeks for football in this country in general, which we will get to. But let's just start off with round one of the 25-26 A-League men's season. A bunch of really, really good matchups, some decent crowds as well that we saw. What caught your eye?
Yeah, of course, it was a pretty interesting first week to start the A-League season. Obviously, you look just looking around the grounds. We had that packed crowd in Adelaide that defeated Sydney FC. Really good vibes there. Brisbane getting a win at home against Macarthur. A couple of draws on the Saturday night between obviously Wanderers and City. Victory drew with Auckland FC at home as well. Perth Glory and Wellington playing that crazy late night game. And of course, the game that probably caught just about everyone's attention is that F3 derby on the Sunday afternoon. I mean, wow, the Mariners and the Jets. If you've somehow, if the game has eluded you somehow, it's pretty much the craziest ending to a football game I think we've ever seen in this country. A penalty save down one end has pretty much turned into a goal down the other, and it's really just a ridiculous game. And it goes to show, just how exciting the football can be in this country, and it's an extremely huge result for the Central Coast Mariners too, who had probably a bit of noise about them in the off season.
Yeah, and some of the noise about the Mariners still remains. I'm still not sure if they've tweeted about their derby win, but nonetheless, it's gotten the attention of just about everyone on football Twitter. And how good was it to have Andrew Redmayne out there as well, who was I guess flagged as a signing pretty early on, and it kind of took a while for that to come through. It did eventually, and certainly paid off very early for them. What do you make of Adelaide? Because there has been more than a bit of noise about them in the off season. Certainly at the immediate end of the last season, there was that off field drama that kind of caught some attention. And some expectation that I saw, at least, they would potentially struggle this year. Didn't have too much trouble one game in, though.
Well, it is an interesting discussion to have for sure. I mean, you look at how they played against Sydney FC, and you could argue there's really no complaints from that side of things. But of course, it's still a long season. The A League is 26 games that we've still got to get through, and Adelaide will play a lot of tougher opposition than Sydney FC. So, realistically, is this a sign of things to come? It's difficult to say, but I think one thing that they have proved against Sydney is that they've got the capability to at least compete. And I think maybe we can't quite rule them out as what a lot of people were doing, towards that back end of the off season when all the off season drop, when all the off field dramas were coming to light, and they had probably the most publicized sort of list of departures out of most of the A-League clubs.
And speaking of the A Leagues, there obviously was a lot of noise about your club in the off season. We know what happened there, and certainly discussions about what happens with Western next year. There's the news about them; they will be in the VPL. That in itself, that's a broader conversation we can have. But look, you've got 12 teams now, just for the flow of the competition. At the expense of Western United, unfortunately. But just for the flow of the competition, you've got none of that weekly buys. You've got a pretty simple six matchups per weekend. Can this at some level help it before you'd hope Western gets back in? And of course, ideally, I mean, my preference is, Canberra would be able to get the 14th slot, notwithstanding promotion relegation. But yeah, how do you think it's going to play out crowd wise and engagement wise, especially as we head into that summer period when the AFLW is done and it's really just going on a one-on-one with cricket and the NBL?
Think it's interesting because, of course, just looking at the schedule, obviously it's a schedule that we've waited a long, long time for. It came out very late because of Western United. But looking at the schedule, I think you could make the case that, yeah, we're going to see a lot less breaks between games. Obviously, some teams might go 3, 4 weeks without playing at home, which might take the sting out of it. I'm looking at Brisbane, who I think have a big stretch without a game at home for a while. But yeah, I mean, just looking at it, momentum wise, the fact that, your club will be playing every week, it helps keep your attention on, the A-Leagues. And I think it's especially good that, in those cities with multiple clubs, Sydney with their three clubs and Melbourne with their two clubs, we're pretty much going to have at least one team in the clubs in playing at home for, at least every week of the season. And where there is, both teams away, it's going to be about maybe a week's gap. So I think it's really, really good to sort of reduce that sort of gap, because when there is the gaps where a team is away, like attention can drop off and people look at other sports like the Big Bash and the NBL. So generally, yeah, I would say crowd wise and attention wise, I think the lack of buys will be very, very helpful for the A-League.
Now, on to the newest competition, the Australian Championship. I was very pleasantly surprised. The first game, South Melbourne versus Sydney Olympic, that was an absolute thriller. And then the rest of the matchups have just not disappointed. Not one has really disappointed. The obviously you had the Broadmeadow game, which was a really close one. I think that in itself, leading into their clash with South Melbourne, is going to be fascinating. But of course, you've also had Heidelberg, who have kind of continued to show why they're one of the top non-A League clubs in the country right now, and that's a well-deserved title, I think, for them. We've seen them play for the last few months in final after final. They've been doing an outstanding job. Have you been loving it? Broadly as a competition, you've seen it in Vic, you've seen it in New South Wales. I could not be happier with how it's going, even with all the noise about the format. I've been really, really pleased.
I think most people would agree that the Australian Championship has been a resounding success so far. I mean, I don't think there's been a single game where I could go, yeah, I didn't really enjoy it. I mean, obviously, for those that followed along, I was up in New South Wales the past weekend and I've been following around Victoria for the last couple of weeks. I don't think I've been to a single game where I was really that bored or not entertained. I've been to multiple great games now. Of course, just from a cultural perspective, you go around and you sort of see the vibe of these grounds and sort of the history around these clubs. You just sort of it's been nothing but an absolute pleasure seeing these games. And there's really been really no strong negatives. I mean, you're getting highlights every week out of the Oz Championship that almost fit in, the top echelons of, world football, and you're getting games that would pretty much not be out of place at any regular cup final. So I think what we've seen from the Australian Championship, both on the pitch and off the pitch, has been nothing short of a resounding success so far. And it's good because we've still got 4 rounds to play and we've still got, an entire knockout stage to play as well, where, attention's only going to pick up as we get closer and closer to a final. And, you know, the case will grow for, that potential promotion and relegation element.
It's been interesting. And look, this is a conversation we're going to have a lot more. I'd love to do some more in-depth content about it. I'm sure you would as well, regarding kind of how this would fit in, let's say in 2 years, when the current structure's dropped and we put in a full home and away kind of season. And there was a proposal, I think it was Blue and White Views on Twitter who put it out. And it really caught my eye. You'll start the A-League in about where it is now. You put on the championship kind of shortly after, and you work to align that with the NPL season. You put in a break, and look, it wasn't perfect, and they're working through it. And there's been a few proposals, but I think it's really viable. Roughly where it is now, and keeping the NPL and the other state leagues where they are now, because you can't move them to summer. That's just not happening. It won't happen. It'd be an awful idea, I think. You can't move the A-League to completely winter, because I don't think you can have that as completely up against the AFL the entire time. But it's possible, and it's just looking more possible. And again, we're speaking 2 weeks into this competition, but you feel it, and you see the enthusiasm, and you see the crowds. I mean, South Melbourne opening up the second stand was a huge surprise for me, at least in their initial game. I know that they're hoping to be able to open it for some future games as well, matchups pending. But the enthusiasm's there, and certainly the future of this comp really, really, really looks strong.
Very exciting, and I think everyone would agree that as every day and every week goes by that this competition goes on, the case for that promotion and relegation system, just gets more and more viable. And obviously, it's a voice that's been around Australian football for a long time. Ever since the death of the NSL, we've had discussion about how can we integrate these past clubs back into top division football. And obviously, I think I've spoken to plenty of fans of clubs of South Melbourne, Sydney Olympic, and Wollongong Wolves while I've been traveling around, and plenty of them are extremely pleased to be back at the national stage, as they should be. But at the same time, they want a chance to shine on the on the top flight, which is an opportunity that sooner or later, I think Football Australia is going to have a really, really strong and broad look at. And of course, we've looked at, obviously scheduling is rough. Of course, we can't move the A-Leagues to the winters because frankly, it would be crippled by, the competition with the AFL and the NRL. That doesn't even get into logistics like ground sharing with the rugby league and rugby union. And we can't move the state leagues to the summer as well, because frankly, as non-professionals and as semi-professionals, realistically, a summer season playing football would be arguably one of the hardest things to do as a non-professional footballer. So the discussion is something that will have to come around. I've also the blue and white views discussion is an interesting one, and I think it's a really interesting case to study to make. But it's something that's going to take a lot of logistical work. But I think Football Australia kind of just has to move the goalposts in any way possible to make it possible, not just to have promotion relegation for the sake of it, but to have viable and healthy promotion and relegation and a healthy sort of footballing system that benefits everyone in the country.
I've said this to you before. I love just from that because I'm a big pro rail guy. I love when you look at the English pyramid and it just keeps going down and down and down. It's just continuous. It's amazing. That is just beautiful. And something like that for football in this country would be huge. Now, I will say I think we're probably one of the only few sickos who would go to an NPL game in late December or something in 45-degree heat. I reckon the market's pretty small for that. So I'm happy where that is. And just quickly, by the way, the news that came through earlier today before we spoke, South Hobart, who have been kind of eyes on them. Obviously, they're the only Tas team in the Australian Championship, and they caught the national spotlight when they played South Melbourne in the Australia Cup, and for like 2 minutes were ahead. They've made a coaching change. What's happened there?
Interesting one. I've had a look at it. Apparently this has been some sort of contractual agreement that they transition midway through the Australian Championship to a different coach, which is something I don't think I've seen in any sport ever, to be honest. But yeah, it's obviously some sort of change. Not the best start for South Hobart, who have started their campaign without a win or a draw thus far. The loss to Marconi Stallions that I saw on the weekend was probably their worst result of the campaign thus far. But yeah, I think it's sort of a big intent of movement to show that, hey, we want to compete and we want to not just be, a Tasmanian team in the competition. We want to, showcase Tasmania on the spotlight. And as the easily the best runaway team in NPL Tasmania all week, they want to be competitive at this national level, especially in a group that has, Marconi Stallions, Wollongong Wolves, and Heidelberg United, who have been running away with their competitions pretty much all season. So it's an interesting change, but it's one that I think shows a really, really big signal of intent on just how South Hobart want to perform in this competition.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear to me that promotion relegation pending, they want to be the first ever Tasmanian team in the A Leagues, and rightfully so. I think they would make a very good push for that. So we'll wait and see there, and we will keep going to these games. We are very, very excited to see how this develops. Tin, as always, thank you.
Thank you very much, Leo.